E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia ei, ei, e ka kikurunga, o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia ei, ei, e ka kikurunga, o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia ei, ei, e ka kikurunga, o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia ei, ei, e ka kikurunga, o POU IERIKI e kai e kero.
E tahi koeirung taihi o tara, te wero wero i te ata, te mokopu koe orangi e hine, e tahi koeirung. Koe hikurangi, koe rarotonga, koe tepu, koe tera, i whanga mātata, te taworangi riri, e tahi ki reira. Ki tēni, ki rihotu, ki rimata, e tahi ki reira. Ka motu ke, e tahi koeirung. Kiri pe tuatahi, kiri pe tuarua, e tahi koeirung. Kiri pe tuatoru, kiri pe tuawha, e tahi koeirung. Kiri pe tuawitu, kiri pe tuawaru, e tahi koeirung. Kiri pe tie aki a kuia e wai ruarangi. E tahi ki reira. Pokorong taring. E re mei taimi, e re mei te motu, e re mei ka rangata matua, ka chakat, ka shimeriki, ka mokupu, e re mei ko IERIKI. Ko tēne tī, ko POU IERIKI. Kohi mai rā i kā karakī o kā karapuna moriori o reko. Ka rahi te mihi ki ko te kato, no tata, no tiwhi etu, no te ao nui, te ao roa, te ao marama, hoko menetai, merumo. This webinar series, POU IERIKI, has been created to introduce, explain, and demonstrate the everyday use of some karakī moriori for those who are learning tare Moriori language, and are interested in tikane Moriori culture. These karakī have been sourced from the writings of the record keepers of Moriori traditions, and are now being brought to life verbally through recitation and discussion to further our understanding of our karapuna Moriori, and to consider how we can properly apply them in the present and in the future. We would like to thank the Mātāwai for its investment in the regeneration of tare Moriori, as well as its ongoing support for Moriori language aspirations. The name of the series, Po IERIKI, was derived from an ancient canoe hauling chant. You would have heard it being recited as the opening track for this webinar. In an earlier series of webinars produced in 2021, 2022, Po IERIKI was explained and taught to participants. Here, the Po represents a pillar, and IERIKI symbolizes leadership, because it takes great strength to take a stand and lead in the face of adversity, and to do so with peace in your heart. Ko himai rā I Po IERIKI. In this session, we are focusing on a karakī called Tchuaporo, also known as Whata a Tamahiwa, and referred to in this webinar as Kuwai ana Tariwa. Please watch the following video and listen to this karakī being recited and the explanations that follow, along with some practical uses of phrases contained in this karakī.
Kuwai ana tariwa, ko tū ana tariwa, ko rongo ana tariwa. Tarewa te whā tō tehi, tarewa te whā tō te mana, tarewa te whā tō te hā, tarewa te whā tō te pūhā ngono I te rangi, tarewa te whāta o Tamahiwa. Tchuaporo whiti, Tchuaporo I tonga, Tchuaporo I te ariki. Kuwai ana tariwa is a karakī that's actually part of the sequence of the dedication of a child. It is one of the last karakī that is recited. As mentioned before, tira koko or manaka mai as part of that sequence. There are quite a few karakī, and it was a process that took place over 1, 2, maybe even longer days. So, Kuwai ana tariwa was a way of bringing everything to a conclusion. It was a way of lifting any other types of barriers or impediments that may prevent the child from being all that that child could be. These days, apart from the dedication ceremony, Kuwai ana tariwa can also be a way of clearing any barriers or any heaviness around our protocols and our practices and our customs, such as when we bring our karapuna back from overseas, repatriating them, or we're going through some kind of process whereby we're trying to resolve an issue. And so this can be a karakī that is used at the end of that gathering or at the end of that particular activity as a way of clearing things away, clearing the heaviness, taking away any burdens, and releasing us and allowing us to continue with our lives, go do the things that are important to us, and be with our families.
Kuwai ana tariwa, ko tū ana tariwa, ko rongo ana tariwa, tarewa te whāta o te ihi, tarewa te whāta o te mana, tarewa te whāta o te hā, tarewa te whāta a te pūhā ngono I te rangi, tarewa te whāta a Tamahiwa, o Tchuaporo I whiti, o Tchuaporo I tonga, o Tchuaporo o te ariki. You'll see in front of you the words for this karakī and a translation of those words. Of course, no translation from Moriori into English is going to be sufficient in really explaining and understanding the depth of what is meant in the words in the tukupu of this particular karakī. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into the meanings behind these words. Now, please remember, there will be a question and answer session later, so please feel free to post any questions and comments in the chat function. Now, as was mentioned in the video, this karakī was traditionally used as the final part of a tohinga for the purpose of lifting tapu or chap from the child who has been dedicated through this tohinga process. This karakī can also be used by us today as a way to relieve any present burden or heaviness that might physically, emotionally, or spiritually obstruct movement or growth. It can also provide a clearance in situations where tapu, chap, has been invoked or is present. And it can also be used to bring an event to a conclusion, and in doing so, free us up to do the things that we need to do. Some important things to note about this karakī is that it immediately asked who was being addressed. The key question at the beginning is kuwai. Kuwai. Try it. Say it. Kuwai. And kuwai in Moriori means who. In this case, the question refers to two entities, two key etu, and their names are Tu and Rongo. Now, as has been mentioned previously in this series, in Moriori tradition, the role of Tu was elevated from that of being about warfare, and warfare which elicits fear and anger and conflict. And in Moriori tradition, Tu was elevated to a place of being about strength and resilience, intestinal fortitude, all those kinds of qualities. Tu is complementary to Rongo. Rongo being the purveyor of peace and resolution. And together, they are strong and possess the attributes required of a child growing up and surviving on rekohu. In saying that, there were also times that those entities, that Tu and even Rongo, needed to be suspended or restored to a place of rest. Te Whata. Now, please note, and when we talked about this in an earlier webinar, wherever you see those little, like a little smile above a vowel in Moriori, it's actually meant to be a very short vowel sound. So really spoken, in the spoken form, it should be Te Whata, Te Whata, Te Whata. But for the purposes of, we'll call it poetic license, in this karakī, the sound has been lengthened to give it more effect and to really deepen that oro, that resonance. So talking about Te Whata, the place where these entities, these etu, have been suspended or been restored to. Because they've been called upon. Throughout this whole tohinga series, many etu are called upon. Uru, ngana, iorangi, tu, tāne, rongo, tangaro. There's just so many that are part of the series of karakī that are recited for the tohinga of a timiti. And because this has happened over several days, so there's an elevation of chap, there's an elevation of tapu that is happening throughout this ceremony. So what's happening as part of the ceremony is that, or as we get to the end of the ceremony, the chap that has been put in place, it needs to be restored to where it belongs. So, and one of the things that was really important about the ceremony is that the tohuk, that is the the spiritual leader who presided over the whole process, would not consume food throughout the whole process. So remember, this is going over several days. And it was also a way for the officiating tohuk to formally, or this particular karakī, as a way of closing off the ceremony. So the tohuk was in a state of shock as they were officiating. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to everybody who is participating in the tohinga. But as a way of bringing the process to a close, this particular karakī, Ko Tchuaporo, Whata, Tamahiwa, Ko, whichever name you prefer to use, was used as a way of lifting the shop. Now, we know that during the whole process that this particular karakī was also preceded by the eating of cooked food. And cooked food that was on the end of a stick, which was also called a whata. So there's a connection between that, the process of taking something out of that state of being shap or being tapu, and being able to bring everyone back into Marama, world of light. Now, as you can see from the words in front of you, there were some really important elements that needed to be addressed and needed to be stored away because the process had been completed. And we'll look at some of these on the next slide. Now, as said before, the last stanza of the karakī invokes the nullifying effects of food, whata, and the cleansing qualities of chua, which is related to water. And that was to restore, revive, and replenish all who have been involved. This karakī also acknowledges the warmth of the sun, whiti, or Ko Tchuaporo I whiti, the purifying chill of the southern winds, or Ko Tchuaporo I tonga, and finally acknowledges the peaceful qualities of leadership. So here's just a bit more information about these particular places upon which these etu were restored and where they were elevated to. So, tarewa te pāta o te ihi, placing the authority on an elevated place. Tarewa te pāta o te mana, placing their power on the elevated place. Tarewa te pāta o te hā, placing their sacred breath on the elevated place. Tarewa te pāta o te pū hā ngono ngono I te rangi. That's a tongue twister, who know? Have a go at that one. Placing the most revered attributes on the elevated place. And as you're going through the series, as we said before, have a go at saying these things. That last one in particular, oh yeah, it had me go for as I was going through and learning this karakī myself and understanding how to say these tukupa. Yeah, we'll come back to the words of the karakī very soon. There's some really important things to remember about our karapuna moriori and the way that they saw concepts such as ihi, mana, ha, and chap. These were concepts that were respected, but also they understood them in a way of knowing that there is a place for everything, where you can't always remain in the state of ihi. You can't always remain in a state of mana. Ha is important because it's about breath, it's about life. But you couldn't stay in a continuous state of chap, of being tapu. And so they understood this. There was a time and place for everything. Now, there's some other things, some contextual information about this particular karakī. In the last part of the karakī, and you're going to see the words on the screen of a very different karakī. Last part of Tchuaporo, the Whata Tamahiwa, refers to a figure called, or a person called Tamahiwa. Now, in the recorded Moriori traditions known as Ko Matangiao, Tamahiwa was noted as being a very powerful leader of the Rauru people in the ancient homeland of Hihiawaiki. Now, according to those stories, Tamahiwa became enraged. He became enraged at what he considered to be the very disrespectful actions of one of his younger relations by the name of Rake. And Rake belonged to the Whataina people. Now, for his actions, Rake was attacked, mutilated, and left for dead by the sons of Tamahiwa. The father of Rake, Tamahiwa, was led to the body of his badly injured son by two birds, Tore, the pied oyster catcher, and Opiritu, the rail, which is actually an extinct species. Tamahiwa was able to bring his son back to life, and the karakī on the screen was recited over Rake to help him heal. And I'm just going to talk it through, just so you can get a feel for the words themselves. Rere mai te tihi, koe kia piri, koe kia tā. Rere mai te pakora, koe kia piri, koe kia tā. Rere mai te pehore, koe kia piri, koe kia tā. Koe kia tūtaki ta uiho, koe kia tūtaki ta uiho. Tūtaki ta imi, tūtaki te toto, te karingio. Tūtaki nuku, tūtaki rangi. Tūtaki I tūtaki o maru. Tūtaki I tūtaki o te whenua. It is said that through this karakī and other things that Tamahiwa did, that he was able to revive and bring his son back to life. One of the really tragic things that came out of this particular event was that for many years afterwards, the effects of this event, of the near death of Rake, it festered and eventually led to more conflict and war between those two peoples, the Rauru and Whataina, which resulted in great losses on both sides. This was one of a chain of events that eventually led to the migration of the ancestors of Moriori from Hihiawaiki directly to Reko. The Whataina people initially seek refuge, although in time the conflict followed them there in the form of the Rauru people, who arrived on a waka called Oropuke. Of course, what we know now is that a covenant of peace was declared by the great Tohuk, Nunuku Whenua, between the warring clans, and that led to over 500 years of unbroken peace under Tikane Moriori. Although they would become a peaceful people, what was clear was that our Moriori ancestors retained many stories about the violence and conflict that was conducted by their ancient ancestors. Such stories were retained, I believe, as a reminder of where they had come from as a people and what they did not want to be again. In a way, Tamahiwa, who's mentioned in the karakī, personifies some of those negative characteristics where a person in a leadership position chooses actions that lead to conflict, war, and destruction. And indeed, in this karakī, Tamahiwa is also elevated to a place where his influence can be contained. So, Hudo, let's go through this karakī together. Let's talk it through. And we're going to take our time, we're going to go through a few times. It's one of those karakī where you take your time. You take your time with it. It's not one to be rushed. We've talked about this thing called oro, about resonance, about vibration. And I believe it's a karakī that needs to be done slowly, because after you've gone through a process, maybe a bit of turmoil, this is a good way of actually slowing things down and reminding ourselves all those things, those really active elements, they need to be put back in their place. So let's go through it together. Ku wai ana tarua. Ko tū ana tarewa. Ko rongo ana tarewa. Tarewa te whata o te ihi. Tarewa te whata o te mana. Tarewa te whata o te hā. Tarewa te whata o te pūhā mono i te rangi. Tarewa te whata o Tamahiwa. Ko Tchuaporo i whiti. Ko Tchuaporo i tonga. Ko Tchuaporo o te IERIKI. Okay, how did you go? What we can do is we can go through it again, just so you can get a feel for it. And like I said before, you have plenty of opportunities later on to come back and review this webinar. And yeah, just listen along. And then say it, piece by piece, say it quiet and take your time. So let's go through it one more time. Ku wai ana tarewa. Ko tū ana tarewa. Ko rongo ana tarewa. Tarewa te whata o ta ihi. Tarewa te whata o te mana. Tarewa te whata o te hā. Tarewa te whata a te pū hā ngono i te rangi. Tarewa te whata a Tamahiwa. Ko Tchuaporo i whiti. Ko Tchuaporo i tonga. Ko Tchuaporo o te IERIKI. A really good technique for learning things like karakī, hokopapa, rongo, and many other things is to take one line at a time. And then as you get better, take it 2 lines at a time or 3 lines at a time. One of the things that has happened to our brains, and I think colonization has had a huge part to play in this, is that it's conditioned us to think in a particular way. Conditioned us to think in a way that actually was unnatural to our karapuna. Because what we know is that for many cultures around the world, and even those cultures that colonizers themselves, that oral language was quickly captured. But what's happened is that we have become reliant on the written word. And that's okay. That's all right. So we've become reliant on the written word and visually, but it's also an opportunity for us to retrain our brains, almost like reset the programming. So for all the karakī that we've gone through in the past, this webinar and the previous 4, it's an opportunity to reset the programming for ourselves. Because if you're not doing the programming, you're the one getting programmed. Something to think about. Anyway, we'll go through this one more time. And then we'll just look and see if anybody has any questions or any comments. Okay. And as I'm saying it, I'm going to just leave a little bit of a gap and just give everybody an opportunity to say it. You can either say it with me or you can say it after me. So one more time. Ku wai ana tarewa. Ko tū ana tarewa. Ko rongo ana tarewa. Tarewa te whata o te ihi. Tarewa te whata o te mana. Tarewa te whata o te hā. Tarewa te whata a te pū hā ngono I te rangi. Tarewa te whata a Tamahiwa. Ko Tchuaporo I whiti. Ko Tchuaporo I tonga. Ko Tchuaporo o te IERIKI. Okay, who knows? Just going to have a look through the chat and just see if anybody has any questions. And so one question has been asked is, what does Tchuaporo mean? Because in the translations given there, Tchuaporo isn't translated. It's one of those terms, actually, there's no one word translation for some of these. That's the nature of language. But the Tchuwa was an actual karakī that was used as part of the tohinga process, and it was about water. So in this karakī, not only are these elements which can be helpful, but can also be injurious. Not only are they being suspended or being elevated to a place where it's they're restored and people are safe from them, but water. Water was a very important part of not just this ceremony, but a whole lot of ceremonies. So the Tchuaporo actually refers to water. Now that's a very simple kind of explanation, and probably one that warrants a lot more discussion so that we can actually understand it. Now, I'm seeing there aren't many questions in the chat. Now, that's okay. There is a lot to take in from this particular karakī and also from this particular webinar. So I'll just give everybody just one last chance. And if not, then we're going to move on. Okay. Wow. This could be the shortest webinar in the whole series of Po IERIKI. You're a quiet bunch tonight. And that's okay. Hey, just while we're talking about these particular karakī, alongside this series, this webinar series of Po IERIKI, there have also been some other resources that have been created. Actually, I just had a question. And the question in chat is there certain tikani we should observe while we learn these karakī? That's a really good question. So, one of the things we need to understand is that the lives we live are different to the lives of our karapuna. What we know of them was that they were a sacred people. And look, that's no more sacred than other peoples and imi around the world. But what was noted, even by Maori, who came to Rekohu in the early 1800s, they noted that, because as Maori, tapu is a very important concept. But even Maori who came to Rekohu noted that with Moriori, they were like next level tapu, next level chap. And so when we think about them and their time and their context, and we think about us now in our time in our context, things are different. We live different kinds of lives. But when it comes to learning things like karakī in particular, I think there's still some things that we need to uphold and maintain. Now, bearing in mind too, that our karakī, we also learn them as rongo, we learn them as Whata, as songs. So a really good way of learning karakī, and this is actually what I do with my timariki and my hunu, is that when we are learning a karakī, we learn it in the dark. And we learn it in the dark because there are no distractions. And sometimes we'll actually sit in our living room, all the lights are turned off, but we might have the fire going, because fire is life as well. And so with the fire going, there we have another entity, mohika, who is fire. And we will learn in the dark because you're focused. Another really good way of learning karakī, and a time when you're quite focused, is actually very early in the morning. When you wake up, before you go have your coffee, who knows? I love my coffee, but before you have your coffee and before you do anything else, for some of us, that's actually one of the clearest times of the day. For others, it's late at night. Regardless of where that place might be, it could be next to your fire in the dark. It could be sitting in your office with the door shut and no one else around. It could be sitting beside the sea, in maybe your favorite place, in a place where there's no one else. Whatever that place is, that's your tukupu. That's your special place. And so you find a place that works for you, and you find ways that work for you as well. So for some, it's rote learning. For some, it's listening. It's playing a recording of something all the time. There are different ways of doing it. Either way, it's just really good to do in a place where you can be focused and you can just let it soak into you. Now, some other really good questions are coming up. Gee, I threatened to cut things off, and now everyone's throwing all these questions. So, another really good question. Karakī Māori has become commonplace in New Zealand in lots of settings. Do you think it's okay to encourage the use of karakī like this in different settings? For example, work, business, well, any number of things. Once again, the lives we live now are different to the lives of our karapuna. But remember, they had karakī for everything. Everything. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we take for granted, because karakī, or even if you do a karakī Māori, they are not bookends. They're not just something you do at the beginning of a meeting and at the end of a meeting as a way of bookending it. And yet, whatever happens in the meeting, doesn't apply to those things. What's important when it comes to using karakī, and once again, karakī Māori too, is that we understand what that karakī is, what it's for, and why we are using it at that time. And that's going to come through application, but I think there's going to be more opportunity for us in the near future to be able to have some more conversations about when we might use it. Okay. Tēnā ko kiwa. Is it okay for wahine or mahine to take karakī? Is there a place or times that it might not be appropriate for our mahine to recite our karakī? That's a good question too. I'm going to use the same answer as what I had before. Our times have changed. Our context has changed. And we also need to remember that the ancestral narratives that were left to us are fragments. But what we can derive from those kōrero karaupuna was that in every part of society, at every level, there was full participation. So I'm expressing an opinion here. I think in order for us to regenerate the speaking of tare moriori and to restore the essence of our tikani, and which will never be the same as how our ancestors were, then we need to ensure that we all understand these karakī and that we all understand these rongo and that we participate in. Now, not everyone's going to be a tohuk and not everyone's going to be a songbird. It's about looking at tare and applying it in the relevance of our lives, in the context of our individual lives. But this is a really good starting place. Where we are as Moriori, I think, is where we were as Māori back in the 1980s. The difference was in the 1980s, I guess, there was a larger pool of knowledge to be able to draw on. Whereas for us as Moriori, it's almost like being at ground zero. But we have enough. We have more than enough to be able to make our language sing again, and for these karakī to be applied in a modern context. Now, the same things happen with karakī in Māori. And what is beautiful to see as Māori is just this absolute blossoming or explosion of creativity in the language. Now, the same question has been asked of, in terms of tikanga Māori. Is it right for wahine to be reciting karakī? Well, actually, yes. Because the tohunga weren't just men. There were ruanuku and ruahine. And more. Everyone had a role to play. Another question. Is it okay for tauiwi to recite our karakī? Yeah, I have been asked this question before. And in my heart, and this is, I said, with all respect to all peoples, and I ask of those who support ta'imi Moriori and those who are not of Moriori descent, I would ask, please consider that when we are these karakī in particular, that it's really important for our Moriori people to become empowered through them. Because sometimes what happens, sadly, is that our people become disempowered because others learn their kōrero and take their kōrero. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the case, because I know that in many cases, people are respectful. So that's what I would ask, is that find ways at Tawiwi, find ways to help Moriori to become more empowered in learning and utilizing karakī. Now, just having a look through here. Ooh, am I able to share some of the differences and similarities of Moriori etu wai and Maori atua wai? Ooh, I wonder who asked that question. I think I'm married to her. And of course, she would ask that kind of question. I think across cultures, water is life, fire is life, wind is life. Oh, and then now someone's just said, oh, it was someone else who asked that question. Okay, I know that person. His name is Dimwana. Okay, how ironic and how appropriate. So, one of the things is that I don't think it's so much about differences, but our ancestral traditions, be that as Māori or be that as Mōreru, came from the same places. They came from those Hawaii or those Hihiawaki. They came from within the Pacific and beyond. And so if we look across cultures, we can see that the elements that we acknowledge, be they etu or atua, we are talking about the same or similar things, but just different ways of expressing it. So that's probably the best explanation I could give right now, because man, we've been a wānanga about that particular topic all night, and I think that's a topic for another day. Okay. Just having another look through the chat there. Who knows? Seeing if there's anything else there. If not, just want to let you know that apart from this webinar series, there's been quite a bit of work from quite a few of our whūnau, especially those on Rekohu. So I'd like to do a huge mihi to our whūnau there who've been active creating resources for a number of years. But in the last year or so in particular, we have some really cool resources, some really cool things coming out very, very soon. And you'll see on your screen, e puka re moriori. So we've got some resources coming out. No, they're not available right now. If anyone's asking, where can I get those? Okay, wait, hold. They are coming. And so these are going to be launched very soon. And all three of these resources, and these are puka, these are books or booklets, have also been created through the support of Tamahiwa. But equally important, probably more important, they've been created through the passion and the commitment of our whūnau, especially those on Rekohu, to be able to create more learning tools, especially for our timariki and our mokopu, for our children and those future generations. So those are coming very soon. And so keep an eye on the Facebook page for Hokati Moriori Trust. And we're going to move along here. Okay. So once again, we hope that you've enjoyed our webinar today. This being the last of the series of Po IERIKI, although this is not the final webinar of all time. So please keep an eye on the Facebook page for Hokati Moriori Trust, and feel free to join us for any upcoming events. And also feel free to rewatch this episode and the others in the series. Once again, we thank Te Mātāwai for its support, and it's no coincidence that I'm wearing a Te Mātāwai jacket. Great jacket, by the way, Te Mātāwai. It's nice and warm, especially now that it's a little bit cold. And we wish to acknowledge all of you and all of those who have been and continue to be part of this journey. Now, at the beginning of this webinar, we paid a tribute to a very special mahine, Lynn Entwistle, who passed away sadly last week. And so the karakī that you heard performed was one that was actually one that was recited to a person who was passing into the next world, whatever that may be. And so we remember Lynn, we remember all of those, acknowledgement to her whūnau in particular, who is still grieving. And we hope that the karakī that was talked about tonight in this webinar might help to lift some of that heaviness in the days to come. And it's only right that we finish this session with the karakī that we've been using in every webinar as part of the series. And once again, this karakī is about helping us to focus on those things that are important. It brings us to the end of this particular journey of this series. But once again, it's about making sure that we have some peace in our lives and calmness above, below, within, externally, and that we feel peace together, united. So, how about we do this karakī together? Taumu wai rum, taumu wai raro, taumu wai roto, taumu wai waho. Haurongo, haurongo, hoko menetai, mirongo. O piriango tahuna. Tawatura.
E POU IERIKI oi, tokina maia e ka kikurumu, o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, tokina maia